Hello, my name is Keshwani. That's K-E-S-H-W-A-N-I, Keshwani. I have been solving data sufficiency problems for GMAT out of this book here, GMAT Review, the official guide, 12th edition. If you do not own this book already, purchase one immediately. You should be able to find it at mba.com. The problem that I'm about to solve is the one that you're going to find on page number 277, data sufficiency problem number 48. Number 48, let's take a look at it. There are altogether 178 of these problems, I believe, and we are 848, which means we are more than quarter of the way done. We'll just keep at it. It says, in June 1989, you have to have the book in front of you, read the problem with me. Don't depend on my reading the problem to you. You have to do the work with me. In June 1989, what was the ratio of the number of sales transactions made by salesperson X? All right. So, number of sales transactions made by person X to the number of sales transaction, I'm just calling it trans, made by person Y. That's the ratio they're looking for. So let's call this sales transaction. Let's call this sales transaction made by person X. Let's just call it small x, and this is for June of 1989. For June 1989. So let's call it subscript J. That's the notation I'm going to use in this problem. So small x represents the number of sales transactions made by person X, and that tells us that it is for June. And this is the number of sales transactions made by person Y. The small y represents the number of sales transactions made by person Y. Subscript tells me that I'm talking about June, and that's the ratio they want us to find. How much is this? That's the question. Let's look at what they give us in the two statements. It's a bit tricky. Before we do any work at all, since this is the data sufficiency problems, let's write down A, D, B, C, E. Let's see what they give us in the first problem, first statement. In June of 1989, that's the same month we're talking about, June of 1989. You have to pay attention to details here because they might change something. They might change, we don't know, I don't know yet. So far they keep making fuss about June of 89, but they have not mentioned any other period at all. But they will. In June of 1989, the salesperson X made 50% more sales transactions than did salesperson Y in May of 1989. You see, they changed. No longer they're comparing June transaction of person X to the June transaction of person Y, but in the first statement they tell us the number of sales transactions made by person X in June of 89, which is what we're calling this thing here, in June. The small x represents the number of sales transactions made by person X in June. We're told is, equal sign means is, 50% more. So 50% more means 1.5 times. 1.5 times what? 1.5 times the sales transaction made by person Y, which is what we're calling small y, but in May of 89. Or let's write down capital M. Since I put down capital J here for the month, so this M represents, the subscript represents the month. Subscript represents the month. The M being May of 89. Well, let's see. Is there any way that we can figure out this ratio the ratio of sales transaction made by person X in June to the sales transaction made by person Y in June by guess statement? No. Some people in their haste will say, well, of course it's 1.5 because you can divide this quantity by that quantity and you get 1.5. You should stop and think for a second. First of all, it cannot be that simple. That's your trigger, that's your cue, that's your hint that something is not right. And then you realize that this is not June, this is May. Had this been June, our life would have been easier. It would have been too easy actually. The ratio would have been 1.5. But this statement by itself is worthless because here they're giving us a sales transaction for person X in June, and here they're giving us a sales transaction for person Y in May. We cannot figure out the ratio for both of these people for the month of June based on what is given in the first statement. It's not there. First statement by itself is not enough. First statement is not enough. That tells us that the answer, whatever it is, cannot be A, nor can it be D. Let's look at second statement. Second statement, let's see what that tells us. In the June of 1989, salesperson Y, alright, in the June of 1989, salesperson Y, so this is June, made 25% more, That means whatever the other quantity is coming up, this is 1.25 times whatever the other quantity, however they're going to finish the sentence. Made 25% more sales transaction than in May of 1989. So we're talking about same person actually. In the second statement, they're not talking about two different people. They're talking about the same people, same person rather. In the second statement, they're talking about person Y, and they tell us that in June of 1989, that's what J is here for. As I told you, the subscript represents the month. So the small y with the subscript J tells us that the sales transaction made by person Y in June is 25% more, hence the 1.25, 25% more than sales transaction made by the same person in May of that year. That's what the second statement tells us. The question is that information enough? If you were to not look at the first statement now, if you look at only the second statement, is that enough to tell you what the ratio is here? The answer is no, for one very simple reason. There is no mention of X here. In the second statement, there is absolutely no mention at all of person X. So how in the world am I supposed to figure out the ratio of sales transaction of X to sales transaction of Y based on this thing? It's impossible. Second statement is also not enough by itself. That tells us that the answer cannot be B. We're going to now put them together and see what happens. Okay, pay attention and see what happens here. Let's put them together. So here we go. Actually, it's right in front of us. It's staring right in our face. Okay, I don't know if you're able to pick up on it right away or not, but it's what they're asking you. What they're asking you for is staring right in our face, right here. The sales transaction made by person X in June, which is right here, to the sales transaction made by person Y in June, which is right here, and we're looking for their ratio, right here. So that ratio would have to, I'm going to raise this equal sign now, would have to equal this ratio right here. It's right in front of your face, as I told you. And since on the top I see sales transaction made by person Y in May, and in the bottom I see sales transaction made by person Y in May, let me change this to capital M again. I've been using capital letter for the month, so that it does not cause confusion here. There you go. This quantity drops out. Voila. And this is your answer. 1.5 divided by 1.25. And that's it. Now what that quantity actually is of no interest to us whatsoever. Because the point here is not to calculate the ratio. The point here is, are you able to figure out the ratio if we had to? And the answer of course is yes. Putting the two statements together, we can figure it out. The answer is C. That's all. That's it. We're done. That's all. Very simple, very straightforward. Just out of curiosity, what would that ratio be? 1.5 is 6 quarters, and 1.25 is 5 quarters. Well, there you go. It's 6 over 5. The ratio is 6 to 5. If we had to figure it out, but we didn't have to, so that was a waste of 3 seconds. Anyway, that was it. I hope you found it helpful. If you wish to get hold of me, for personal private tutoring, tutoring over the telephone or through the internet via Skype or face-to-face tutoring, go to my website at www.prep.gmat.com or go to kishwaniprep.com and send me an email. All right. Thanks.